Okay, so no secret, the data center industry is getting excited by AI, as I guess the whole world is. But just what are you seeing in terms of the hype versus the reality, shall we say, at the moment when it comes to AI and data centers?
I think that, AI is the hype, right? All these companies are racing to build AI data centers as fast as they can. The competition's fierce, the speed, the requirements, the pressure. And it's a race to own this technology, right? To be the owner of the technology, whether it's a large language models, the inference data centers, et cetera. And it is hype, but I think, there's something people forget. There's something like 9,000 to 10,000 data centers in the world, right? Those don't exist because of AI.
Yep.
Those exist because you and I communicate every day. Your family's on Facebook. Your family's on this app.
My
and
wife
that
stores
app.
a lot of photos in the cloud, yes.
So those data centers are still the most, the largest size or the largest parts of share in the world. But AI is the newest data center, which changes the requirements and how they're built. That's the difference, right? It's the shifting of how they're built, and it's the shifting of what's required to build them.
And in terms of the speed of the sort of building out of the AI, particularly obviously at the moment, I think it's the hyperscale. I think the inferencing is possibly more exciting when that happens. Just what are you seeing in terms of, because I know people are declaring all this huge capacity they're going to build and then they find out they can't get any power and stuff. So do you have any sort of views as to how it's actually, the sort of theory and the practice are?
Yeah, I think Phil, they're gonna find a way to build. Right? But I think what you're seeing is them go to areas you wouldn't see before, right? Look at Europe. Power's a challenge in Europe, right? Where are they going? They're going to the Nordics, right? They're going north where they can get power. They're going to areas that don't have data centers. So you're seeing them go into areas versus adding on to legacy campuses where there's power constraints. Okay, that's number one. Number two, that presents a whole set of challenges, right? They got to get agreements with the government. People, right? Getting the suppliers line. But it's real. There is it isn't hype. They are building to the capacity, right? I can affirm that the builds are real and the builds are real.
And in terms of Honeywell's involvement, obviously you're a huge corporation involved in many, many industries. What is it that you are sort of bringing into the data center industry? And do you have a particular sort of AI play, or is it sort of business as usual, whether it's an AI data center or shall we say, a standard legacy data center?
There's differences in the design, but basically Honeywell, if you break down what we do, BMS, fire, security, and now electrical products, right? Low voltage, medium voltage, transformers, switchgear. So we're playing deeper and wider across the data center space, right? It gives us an opportunity to be more relevant with those customers. And customers need it all, right? Customers have to have those four things to open a data center. Now, where do we play a little different? Great question you asked was, legacy build versus an AI build. Typically, the difference comes down to point counts in the BMS for us, right? When you're doing a BMS, the liquid cooling causes you to do things a little different than you would in a traditional, well, I'll just call it air-cooled data center, right? Or chilled water, whatever you want to call it. And so the builds, although different, may require different things, different, you collect different pieces of data. The concept itself is the same, right? There's more pressure on the actual build of the data center around power, around liquid cooling, around all the requirements that go into that data center versus the pressure on us. The second thing is, you asked a question about how do we play with AI, right? So Honeywell, sometimes people think, oh, Honeywell, you're in data centers? We've been in data centers a long time, right? You look at most buildings, we've been in buildings for hundreds of years, right? And so a data center is a different building with more points, but it's not like it's foreign to us, right? Our controls, our software have been around a long time. So we've taken a lot of this data, and you'll hear about our connected strategy, right? In traditional buildings where we collect data and we use AI to make decisions. We are starting to do the same for data centers, right? Can we automate tasks in a data center that a human operator used to do. Now, I think what you get into is the emotional battle of does a data center today trust a human or trust an AI? And today, they trust humans, right? I think it's going to be a gradual evolution to get to that AI trust that we've built in other buildings, right? Because, they have SLAs, right? What happens if your internet goes down at home, right? Your family goes nuts. So I think it's going to take some time before they trust it.
But presumably the sheer sort of scale and complexity of these newer data centers means that you're going to need quite a lot of humans. If that's the way you go to keep an eye on everything, then that's where maybe AI and automation take over, because they can deal with the sort of thousands of data points that are coming back. Is that right?
I think that's right. And I also think, as we discussed, they're going into newer markets. So there's a people problem, right? You constantly hear nobody can find the people they need to run these data centers. So at some point, they're going to have to depend more on AI at some point. And so we will begin to release applications, things, do tests with these customers, say, does this work? Do you like it, right? Because it's going to come down to what do they trust to make that decision and what they don't. Because it's their SLAs on the line, right? It's that customer that's it's that data center operator that's going to be on the line if that application drops and causes some penalties with the customer.
And just on the sort of fire and related security, are you finding, I mean, obviously it's always important because data centers are critical infrastructure, but are you finding there's even more emphasis now because the value of what's inside the data center is just increasing, therefore they can't afford any sort of outages?
I think that the data, the regulations are going to get tighter, and you see it in countries today, right? We have to have specific data centers in certain countries because data can't leave that data center, right? Now you're talking artificial intelligence. So I think the countries, we don't know what everybody's going to do, but I think you're going to see more pressure around the intelligence, collection of data, in-country rules, which will affect how all these guys operate data centers.
Yeah. And specifically on the fire risk, I mean, clearly people have maybe, an interest in sort of exaggerating or downplaying, but what's your sort of view as to, we hear every now and then about, battery fire or whatever, but just is it becoming more prevalent or is it just because there are more data centers being built and out there, therefore there's all just naturally going to be a slight increase in these incidents?
I think there's two things that affect that. One is the growth of lithium-ion batteries on UPSs and battery energy storage systems. It multiplied over the last 5 years, right? So data centers have been around, let's call it 20 years, right? Well, the last 5 have been instrumental with lithium-ion, the last 7, 8, whatever you want to call it. So that growth, first of all, has put more in the market, multiplied by the growth of the data center business itself. So there's more out, so there's more risk. It is a serious situation, right? If you look how Honeywell approaches that, we have our traditional fire products, right? VESDA, detection, panels. So we're common among data centers because we can detect smoke very fast. But we also have a application called Lion Tamer. We acquired a company a few months ago. That application can detect lithium-ion gas, certain gases that are released. An example, maybe it can give you a 20-second advantage. Maybe it gives you a 10. But with the lithium-ion fire, that can be crucial versus thermal runaway. So I think customers are asking more about those things. And I think it's because of the size of the market, the shift to lithium-ion. So I think it's a combination of both. And we're seeing customers starting to say, we need something besides traditional battery monitoring systems in those units. So it's a huge risk.
And in terms of one of the other areas that people are sort of talking about at the moment is collaboration's been talked about, I suppose, since Noah built his Ark, but it's never really come into being. But are you, as a company, finding that is finally beginning to happen because it has to, again, because, building management, data centers, the whole supply chain needs to work closer together to bring the projects to fruition as quickly as possible and as safely as possible?
I think it is, right? In past, I would tell you, I've been in this space a long time. There's times I've felt like a partner. There's times I've felt like a vendor, right? So let's just be honest, as we've gone through this cycle. I think we are in that partner collaboration mode. Because if you look at the BMS, as you said, it's not the most expensive thing to implement in a data center, albeit it's a small piece, but it's critical, right? They can't run their days. So when you look at all the trades involved, right? The GC, electrical, fire partners, the customer, right? Their requirements. And us, we have to collaborate, right? We have to collaborate in ways we didn't before. And we're seeing it occur across all our projects globally, right? And that helps the projects go faster, right? That also builds trust between all of us so we can do more projects together. But definitely there's been a shift, right? I've seen a shift of we need to work together closer versus you're the vendor, right? Yeah. Give me a price. So you're seeing, I think you're seeing, and you're going to see more collaboration because the pressure on the supply is unbelievable, right? Yeah. You take a current supply chain, double or quadruple the demand. Yeah. They got to find it somewhere.
Yeah, no, I was going to maybe finish with that. So the pressure, I mean, obviously the power is where everyone's saying there's just not enough power to go, but there are other bottlenecks. So how robust or not do you think is the whole supply chain from power, water, with the various, sort of mechanical and electrical, bearing in mind this sort of increased activity? Do you think there will be a bit of a, I mean, there are already stories on there of sort of slowdown of projects and stuff. Do you think it's going to get worse, or do you think the industry will fix the problems in a timely fashion, shall we say?
I think there's two things that are going to happen. As we've discussed, they'll go to new areas. Two, you will see these large players find a way to get power, right? Yep. You've already seen a certain one try to buy a nuclear power plant, right?
Yeah.
I envision at some point they'll come up with some type of power generation scheme, either that they do themselves, combined with the utility. We're going to see things we haven't seen before, right? But they're going to get their power, right? That is a serious constraint. And I do think if they don't plan, you will see things go on hold, paused. Nobody knows where the AI is going, right? If you look at a traditional rack, for years they ran at 5 and 20 kilowatts. Oh, I remember for years, we're going to get it to 25. We're going to
right. Yeah.
Now they're at 50, 100, 300. Google said they have a design for 1,000.
And the 1 megawatt racks out there somewhere.
So, I mean, that's going to cause some crazy stuff. But I think, power's one. I think people's another, and the third one's still water, as a lot of the legacy data centers are still water chilled. So I think as long as you have all those constraints, and then when you take power, so now I got power, right? But you need all the transformers and the switch gear, and that's why we've aligned with LS, right? Yeah. We're having a pretty positive response. Those supply things are constrained, right? These large players have long order times, so we have an opportunity to come in and start positioning those products to meet the demand, and the market's been very responsive to it.
And so, maybe just finally, in terms of the future for Honeywell, obviously you've got that integration going on. Anything else you can share as to what we might expect from you over the coming months?
I think for Honeywell, right, we took our core, we've expanded into power,
yep.
and now part of my role is do we look at cooling, liquid cooling? What other facets of the data center can we play? I think that's one. I think, two, this AI piece is going to be a differentiator, right? Once these operators begin to trust it, we're a very fickle industry, right? We love technology, but we're also very...
Yeah, they want someone else to try first before you get...
They're not going to be the first guy in saying, hey, I'm going to turn everything over. Yeah. So I think those are two areas that are going to change the industry we're in today.